Here's a question that most leaders never want to face. Would you take the blame for something that wasn't your fault to protect someone else? Not spin it or deflect it, not quietly let the heat pass to someone who had it coming. Actually, step forward, absorb the consequences, and say, "This is on me." That's a hard question. Most of us, if we're honest, have to think about it, but Jesus didn't. I'm Bill, and this is the greatest leadership story ever told. The 5 episode series where we look at the good news of Jesus, not just as the most important story in history, but as the most complete picture of leadership that's ever lived. Today, we're at the cross. And what happened there is the most radical act of accountability in human history. Let's dive in. 700 years before Jesus was born, the prophet Isaiah wrote something that should have seemed impossible. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 6. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. Isaiah didn't know his name yet, but he was describing exactly what Jesus would do. Now, fast forward to Romans chapter 5, verse 8. Paul writes, "But God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us." While we were still sinners. Not after we cleaned up, not once we've earned it, but before we've done anything to deserve it. Now, here's the story. Jesus, who had lived a life completely without sin, walked willingly into the most brutal form of public execution in the Roman world. He was mocked, beaten, and nailed to a cross. And the charge against him? The sign above his head read, "King of the Jews," a crime he didn't commit for a kingdom that was his by right. And here's what I want you to notice. He didn't do it reluctantly, not bitterly. He didn't remind everyone in earshot what it was costing him. He asked forgiveness for the very people driving the nails. That's not being passive. That's not weakness. That is the most deliberate, voluntary act of absorbing consequences that the world has ever seen. He owed nothing, and yet he stepped in front of everything. Now, for those of you who are aspiring leaders, how does this translate to the way you lead? Well, here's something I've observed consistently in my years of HR work. And it was one of the clearest predictors of whether a leader built real trust or just managed compliance. What do they do when something went wrong? Because at some point, things will go wrong. A project misses, a client's unhappy, a team member just drops the ball. And in that moment, every leader makes a choice. Do I absorb it or do I redirect it? The leaders who redirected, who pointed to the process or the team or even the circumstances, they may have protected themselves in the short term. Their teams noticed. And trust, once it starts leaking, it's hard to stop. The leaders who absorbed it, who walked into the difficult conversation and said, "That happened on my watch, and here's what we're going to do to fix it." Those leaders built something can't be manufactured any other way. Their teams ran through walls for them, not because they were perfect, because they felt safe. That's what the sacrifice on the cross demonstrates for us. Jesus didn't redirect the consequence. He absorbed it, and it changed everything. Here's the one thing I want you to take away today. The most courageous thing a leader can do is take responsibility they didn't have to take. Not because it's easy, not because it's fair, because it's what leadership actually costs. And it's what trust is actually built on. So here are the questions I want to leave with you. Where do you have an opportunity right now to step into accountability instead of stepping back from it? And what would it mean for your team if you did? Now, that moment may be uncomfortable. It may feel unfair, but it might also be your most important leadership move this week. And it starts with a cross. On next episode, we're going to talk about what happens when everything looks finished and why the best leaders refuse to let that be the final word. I'll see you in the next episode of the greatest leadership story ever told.